Hello and welcome to the Bulletin vlog. I'm Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and I'm joined by our Bulletin Editor, Dennis Hall.
Hello, everyone.
Now, Dennis, I noticed the Bulletin carried quite a bit of regulatory compliance and governance last week, including DLUHC's announcement to name and shame public sector landlords who receive findings of maladministration against them by the Ombudsman. And then there's the ICO highlighting that failure to comply with an enforcement notice on FOI compliance could lead to an application to the High Court for a finding of contempt of court. Now, you've been considering both the future of governance and the appalling statistics involving abuse against councillors. Dennis, your big hitters from the Bulletin, please.
Well, Helen, one other thing is this. We just can't get away from artificial intelligence in the news. The impact on legal roles, organisational governance, and the need for regulation raises profound questions for our sector. And now, Lord Evans, chair of the Committee on Standards, has written to all public bodies asking them about what they're doing to prepare for AI and whether they've met the recommendations in their report published in 2020. In the letter, Lord Evans says, it's our view that technology has the potential to revolutionise the delivery of public services, but it is the way that technology is used and governed by government departments and public bodies that will determine this. And the response deadline is the 15th of September. Next, a major survey by the Local Government Association has found that the number of local councillors who have reported feeling at risk in their role due to rising levels of abuse and intimidation has increased to a new high in the last year. The survey conducted in June 2023 found that 81% of councillors reported experiencing intimidation and or abuse in their role as a councillor in the last year, which is an increase of 8% from the year before. Furthermore, 82% said they felt at risk at least some of the time whilst fulfilling their role, and this is up 73% from last year. Helen, as you know, we've covered this issue many times in our conferences, but there simply doesn't appear to be any downward trend in this serious issue. Helen.
No, and not only is it totally unacceptable, it must surely be impacting on those who come forward to take on these vital roles. And we know there's a lack of remote meeting provision, for instance, has stopped certain demographics from stepping forward, or indeed led to the removal of councillors by virtue of the 6-month rule. And this must surely be a significant threat to democracy, Dennis.
Indeed.
Now, this week in Parliament, in the Commons of Interest to Local Government, we have all questions on education, including topics such as persistent absence, recruitment and retention of teachers, as well as educational outcomes. There's a social housing regulation bill, which will consider the House of Lords message, a motion on draft environmental civil sanctions and draft environmental permitting regulations, and a motion on Russian sanctions EU exit amendment number 3 regulations. In Westminster Hall, there's a petition in regard to teaching assistants' pay. That's quite interesting. And a debate on the cost of living and the private rental sector. There's also debate on planning and solar farms. And at General Committee, there is the draft Building Safety Leaseholder Protections England Amendment Regulations debate. Now in LLG offerings, we have a national leader meeting on information governance this week on Thursday, where we will, very topically, Dennis, be examining artificial intelligence in the public sector. And that's going to be by Matt Whelan and Charlotte Clayson from Trowse and Hamlin. And indeed, we do have a national lead programme running throughout August when it gets a bit quieter. So you don't miss us in the summer months, please sign up for that. And now, as always, a sneaky peek at what's coming up in Bulletin number 28. Dennis.
Well, the sneaky peek this week, Helen, is back to that COVID inquiry, inevitably. We published last week the evidence and the transcript for the COVID hearing on the 12th of July, when LGA Chief Executive Mark Lloyd gave evidence. We plan to provide some analysis of this in Bulletin 28 and what it all revealed. But staggeringly, we now know a number of things. Exercise Cygnus, for example, a planning exercise on influenza, which was supposed to involve local authorities, was delayed. And that delay led to disengagement of numerous local resilience forums. And the final report on exercise Cygnus found the UK's preparedness and response was not currently sufficient to cope with the extreme demands of a severe pandemic of the type that would have a nationwide impact across all sectors, including our own. And Lloyd criticised the government's top-down approach during the pandemic and how his sector tended to be brought in as a participant on just a small scale. Now, Michael Gove gave evidence on the 13th of July, and we will include more links to that in our inquiry coverage in next week's bulletin. Helen.
Well, Michael Gove had quite a lot to say, actually, and a slightly different stance on matters. So people should definitely have a look at that. And for more detailed coverage of the bulletin entries, don't forget to listen to the Grapevine podcast. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too.